Some places are abandoned for a reason. And these prisons? They feel like they're still holding on to something. Inside these crumbling walls, men lived, suffered, and died. Some in silence, others screaming for mercy. From a prison where real-life horror experiments left inmates scarred for life, to a place so haunted that even hardened officers refuse to go inside, these aren't just forgotten buildings. Today, we're taking you inside the 7 most chilling abandoned prisons in Pennsylvania that you'll never forget. So make sure to watch till the end, because we've a surprise for you in this video. Number 7. Old Franklin County Jail. Located in the heart of Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, the Old Franklin County Jail stands as a testament to over 2 centuries of history. Constructed in 1818, this Georgian-style building is one of the oldest structures in the area and remarkably survived the Confederate burning of Chambersburg in 1864. Serving as the county jail for more than 150 years, the old jail housed a variety of inmates, from petty criminals to notorious figures. Notably, it detained Captain John Cook, an associate of abolitionist John Brown, following the failed raid on Harper's Ferry. The facility is also believed to have been a stop on the Underground Railroad, offering refuge to runaway slaves seeking freedom in the North. Beyond its function as a detention center, the old jail's architecture and resilience make it unique. The complex includes the original 1818 building, an 1880 annex, and a courtyard enclosed by a 20-foot-high limestone wall. The building's endurance through significant historical events, such as the 1864 burning of Chambersburg, adds to its mystique. Throughout its operation, the jail witnessed numerous significant events. During the Civil War, it temporarily held Union soldiers before their relocation. Remarkably, when Confederate forces burned much of Chambersburg in 1864, the old jail was one of the few buildings left standing. Its walls have also echoed with the footsteps of various criminals, including those incarcerated for prohibition-related offenses in the early 20th century. Ceasing operations as a jail in 1971, the building now serves as a museum and the headquarters for the Franklin County Historical Society. Visitors can explore original cells, including the ominous dungeons, and view a range of historical artifacts from the region. The old jail offers guided tours, providing insights into its storied past and the broader history of Franklin County. Number 6. State Correctional Institution, Greensburg. Hidden in the rolling hills of Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania, the SCI Greensburg once held over 1,000 inmates behind its towering fences. Opened in 1969, this medium-security prison was designed to house male offenders, handling a mix of violent criminals and repeat offenders. Over time, it expanded, increasing its inmate capacity and security measures. But despite its long-standing presence, Greensburg's time as a prison came to an abrupt and unexpected end. In 2013, after more than 4 decades of operation, SCI Greensburg was shut down with little warning. The Pennsylvania Department of Corrections cited budget cuts and declining inmate populations as the primary reasons for its closure. But what made this shutdown different was the speed at which it happened. Entire cell blocks were emptied overnight, leaving behind abandoned dormitories, rusting prison gates, and empty guard towers. It was as if the prison had been frozen in time, with documents, furniture, and even personal inmate belongings left behind. After its closure, former prison guards and maintenance workers who visited the site began reporting strange experiences. Some claimed they heard voices echoing through the halls, while others reported the unmistakable sound of footsteps in empty corridors. One former officer even described an experience where he walked through the abandoned cell blocks, only to feel like he was being watched the entire time. Could it be the spirits of former inmates still lingering? Or just the ghostly silence of an abandoned prison? Whatever the case, SCI Greensburg quickly gained a reputation as one of Pennsylvania's eeriest abandoned prisons. Today, SCI Greensburg remains abandoned, its once bustling corridors now filled with dust, decay, and collapsing ceilings. While the fences and security towers still stand, the facility has been left to rot, with nature slowly reclaiming the grounds. Unlike some abandoned prisons that have been converted into museums or historical sites, Greensburg has been left untouched, a ghost of what it once was. Few places have been abandoned as suddenly as SCI Greensburg, making it one of the most haunting forgotten prisons in Pennsylvania. Number 5. Western Penitentiary. On the banks of the Ohio River, hidden behind high stone walls and rusting fences, sits Western Penitentiary, a prison with a history stretching back to the 19th century. Also known as SCI Pittsburgh, this facility was one of Pennsylvania's oldest and most notorious prisons, opening its doors in 1882. Designed to hold some of the state's most hardened criminals, it quickly became a high-security fortress, with watchtowers looming over the prison yard and thick iron bars sealing off the outside world. While Western Penitentiary was meant to keep criminals locked in, history shows that it wasn't always successful. In the early 1900s, the prison gained a reputation for frequent escape attempts, with prisoners digging tunnels, overpowering guards, and even trying to swim across the Ohio River to freedom. Some made it out for days, weeks, or even months before being recaptured. Others weren't as lucky. Many drowned in the strong river currents, their escape attempts ending in tragedy. As the years passed, Western Penitentiary became one of Pennsylvania's most overcrowded prisons. The aging infrastructure, combined with deteriorating conditions, made it one of the most criticized facilities in the state. Reports of violence, gang activity, and mistreatment of prisoners became more frequent. By the early 2000s, the state debated shutting it down, but the prison remained operational for another decade, until officials finally made the call. In 2017, the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections permanently shut down Western Penitentiary, citing budget cuts and a declining prison population. Hundreds of inmates were transferred overnight, and the once busy facility was suddenly left silent. Today, the prison stands completely abandoned, with empty guard towers, crumbling walls, and cells that haven't been touched in years. But despite being vacant, Western Penitentiary hasn't lost its eerie presence. Even before its closure, there were rumors that the prison was haunted. Guards reported hearing strange voices and footsteps in empty hallways, and some even claimed to see shadowy figures moving between the cells. Since its abandonment, urban explorers who have entered the site illegally have described an overwhelming sense of unease, as if something unseen is still watching from the shadows. Today, Western Penitentiary remains sealed off to the public, its fenced perimeter and guard posts still intact, but its inside slowly crumbling away. Unlike some historic prisons that have been preserved as museums, this one has been left to rot, a silent reminder of Pittsburgh's dark past. I hope you're enjoying this video so far, so make sure to hit the subscribe button and let us know if there's any abandoned place you'd like us to feature in the upcoming videos. Number 4. Old Cumberland County Prison. Sitting in the heart of Carlisle, Pennsylvania, the Old Cumberland County Prison doesn't look like a typical jail. With its castle-like stone walls, arched windows, and imposing towers, it appears more like a medieval fortress than a correctional facility. Built in 1854, this prison served Cumberland County for over 130 years, witnessing countless stories of crime, punishment, and even rumored hauntings before finally shutting its doors in 1984. Unlike modern prisons, which are built for function over form, the Old Cumberland County Prison was designed with heavy Gothic Revival architecture. Its thick stone walls and watchtowers weren't just for decoration. They were meant to keep prisoners locked in and the outside world locked out. But despite its fortress-like design, the prison was notorious for overcrowding, harsh conditions, and in some cases, brutal punishments. Over the years, many criminals passed through its doors, ranging from petty thieves to violent offenders. But the prison didn't just hold criminals. It also became a temporary holding facility for Union soldiers during the Civil War, adding yet another layer to its history. The thick stone walls of the prison have absorbed decades of suffering, and according to many visitors, the spirits of former inmates may still linger. Some claim to have heard whispers, footsteps, and even felt sudden cold chills while walking past the old cells. The dungeon-like basement, where prisoners were once held in solitary confinement, is rumored to be the most active area for paranormal activity. Though it officially closed in 1984, the old Cumberland County Prison wasn't left to decay. Instead, it was converted into offices for the Cumberland County government, preserving much of its original architecture and eerie atmosphere. Number 3. State Correctional Institution Cresson. Hidden deep in the mountains of Cambria County, Pennsylvania, the SCI Cresson looks like just another abandoned prison. But its past is far darker than most people realize. This facility wasn't just a prison. It was also once a mental hospital and tuberculosis sanatorium, where thousands of patients and prisoners suffered behind closed doors. With a history filled with neglect, abuse, and even death, it's no surprise that SCI Cresson has gained a reputation as one of the most unsettling abandoned places in Pennsylvania. Long before SCI Cresson became a correctional facility, it opened in 1913 as Cresson Tuberculosis Sanatorium, a place where patients suffering from tuberculosis and other infectious diseases were sent for treatment. But in those days, treatment often meant isolation, suffering, and in many cases, death. In 1956, the sanatorium was converted into a mental institution, housing hundreds of patients with severe mental illnesses. Like many psychiatric hospitals of that time, it was overcrowded, understaffed, and filled with reports of mistreatment. Patients were subjected to harsh conditions, outdated treatments, and sometimes even abuse from staff members. Some were locked away for years, forgotten by society, and many never left the facility alive. By the 1980s, the hospital was shut down, and the buildings were converted into SCI Cresson, a medium-security prison. Thousands of inmates passed through its gates over the years, but conditions inside weren't much better than in the past. Reports of abuse, overcrowding, and harsh punishments made it one of the more notorious prisons in the state. One of the most shocking reports involved the use of solitary confinement on mentally ill prisoners. A 2013 federal investigation found that inmates suffering from severe mental health issues were being locked away for months or even years in total isolation, often with little to no medical treatment. The abuse scandal led to a major lawsuit, and not long after, the prison was shut down for good. Since its closure in 2013, SCI Cresson has been left to rot and decay. Nature is reclaiming the buildings, with crumbling walls, rusted cell doors, and overgrown courtyards, making the site look like something out of a horror movie. But it's not just the visuals that make this place unsettling. Visitors who have dared to explore the abandoned prison report, hearing strange whispers, footsteps echoing down empty hallways, and shadowy figures moving in the dark. Given its history as both a mental asylum and a prison, it's no wonder why many consider SCI Cresson to be one of the most haunted abandoned prisons in Pennsylvania. Today, SCI Cresson remains abandoned, with its rusting fences and decaying buildings standing as a grim reminder of its past. The site is off-limits to the public, but that hasn't stopped urban explorers and ghost hunters from sneaking inside to document its eerie atmosphere. And hey, if you love exploring abandoned places or ghost towns, you'd love our This playlist. The link in description and on the end screen. Now let's move to our next location. Number 2. Holmesburg Prison. Tucked away in northeast Philadelphia, Holmesburg Prison might look like just another decaying structure, but inside its walls lies one of the darkest chapters in American prison history. Built in 1896, this massive stone fortress was designed to house some of the city's most dangerous criminals. But while most prisons are known for violence behind bars, Holmesburg became infamous for something even worse: human experimentation. Holmesburg's high walls, narrow corridors, and single inmate cells made it one of the most secure and feared prisons in Pennsylvania. Overcrowding, harsh conditions, and violent clashes between inmates and guards were common. But what truly sets Holmesburg apart from other abandoned prisons is what happened behind closed doors. From the 1950s to the 1970s, Holmesburg was home to one of the most disturbing human experiments in U.S. history. Led by Dr. Albert Kligman, a dermatologist from the University of Pennsylvania, These top-secret experiments were conducted on inmates without proper consent. Prisoners were injected with chemicals, exposed to biological agents, and had their skin burned and scarred as part of research funded by the US military and private companies. Some were unknowingly exposed to radioactive materials, mind-altering drugs, and dangerous viruses, all under the guise of medical research. Inmates later reported lifelong health issues, including severe skin damage, cancer, and psychological trauma. Many of them never received compensation or justice, and to this day, Holmesburg is remembered as one of the worst examples of unethical medical testing in US history. After decades of abuse, violence, and controversy, Holmesburg was finally shut down in 1995. By the time it closed, its walls had absorbed more than a century of suffering, and many believe some of that energy still lingers. Since its closure, security guards, urban explorers, and even law enforcement officers who have entered the abandoned facility report strange whispers, footsteps echoing in empty hallways, and the feeling of being watched. Some even claim to have seen shadowy figures moving between the cells. Today, Holmesburg Prison remains completely abandoned. Its stone walls cracked, its cells rusting, and its corridors collecting dust. While it is sometimes used for police training and film shoots, the prison is largely off-limits to the public. But even in its decayed state, Holmesburg stands as a haunting reminder of a past that many would rather forget. Number 1. Eastern State Penitentiary. Towering over Fairmount Avenue in Philadelphia, Eastern State Penitentiary isn't just an abandoned prison. It's a monument to suffering, isolation, and punishment. Opened in 1829, this facility was the first true penitentiary in the world, introducing a radical new form of punishment: solitary confinement. While it was meant to inspire repentance, it instead drove many inmates insane. Eastern State was ahead of its time, featuring high stone walls, cathedral-like hallways, and a unique radial design, where each cell had its own small exercise yard and a single slit in the ceiling for light, known as the Eye of God. But what really set it apart was its strict solitary confinement system. Prisoners were kept completely alone. They couldn't see, hear, or communicate with anyone, including the guards. If they tried to talk, they were met with brutal punishments. Some were even forced to wear black hoods when outside their cells to ensure they never saw another human face. Over the years, Eastern State held some notorious criminals, including Al Capone, who spent 8 months here in luxury compared to other prisoners. His cell was furnished with a desk, a lamp, and even a radio, but many believe he was haunted by the ghosts of his past, claiming he saw the spirit of James "Jimmy" Clark, one of the men killed in the St. Valentine's Day massacre. Another chilling story comes from Willie Sutton, the infamous bank robber, who attempted an escape through a 97-foot tunnel that he and other inmates dug beneath the prison. Unfortunately for them, they were caught just before making it out. While Eastern State's solitary confinement was meant to reform criminals, it often led to madness. Prisoners talked to themselves, hallucinated, and even committed suicide due to the crushing loneliness. Eventually, solitary confinement was abandoned, and the prison was converted into a more traditional facility. But by the 1960s, the prison was outdated and overcrowded, leading to its official closure in 1971. For decades, the site sat empty, crumbling, and forgotten. With its long history of suffering and death, it's no surprise that Eastern State is considered one of the most haunted places in the US. Visitors and paranormal investigators have reported shadowy figures in the halls, ghostly whispers, and sudden cold spots. One of the most famous ghost stories comes from cell block 12, where echoing laughter has been heard despite the block being completely empty. Others have seen full-bodied apparitions, doors slamming on their own, and even the sound of footsteps following them. Today, Eastern State Penitentiary is a museum, offering tours that take visitors through its dark corridors, abandoned cells, and eerie hallways. Every Halloween, it transforms into a haunted attraction, drawing thrill-seekers looking for a scare. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, one thing is undeniable. This place still holds echoes of its past,